Story 1. Any measure introduced to protect children or justified similarly is a manipulation tactic to invade privacy and collect more data. Story 2. Civil asset forfeiture is defended as a way to ensure criminals do not profit from crime, but it often allows a police department to enrich itself. Depending on the state, authorities can take almost anything suspected of being used during a crime, and you must fight to get it back or they simply keep it. If you are carrying your rent money in cash and are arrested for resisting arrest, they can make the thinnest argument and keep it. I'm being somewhat hyperbolic, and it is not everywhere in the United States, but there are many frustrating stories related to civil asset forfeiture. Story 3. Corporate subsidies are just stealing money from the working class and giving it to the rich. Story 4. There was a policy in the 2010s when I went to college that may still be in effect. Until you turned 25 or got married, the free application for federal student aid required including your parents' income, even if you lived independently. This was supposed to help many students, but I lived on my own earning $1 above minimum wage, and my parents never gave me any financial support. In fact, they kicked me out after graduation. I could have attended school almost for free if I had been able to report my true financial situation. Because my mother changed careers and began earning much more, her income was counted as my household income, and I had to rely entirely on predatory loans. Story 5. Recency bias aside, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom just announced that digital identification will be mandatory to work legally in the country going forward. The government claims it is for border security and to combat gangs. The chat control policy being promoted now is even more deranged. Story 6. Medicare prescription drug coverage. It was promoted as making drugs affordable for seniors and people with disabilities, but it eliminated collective bargaining and required Medicare to pay the set price for covered medicines. Taxpayers have overpaid by tens of billions of dollars since it was enacted. Story 7. The Uniting and Strengthening America by Providing Appropriate Tools Required to Intercept and Obstruct Terrorism Act and the Uniting and Strengthening America by Fulfilling Rights and Ensuring Effective Discipline Over Monitoring Act were presented to the United States as measures to protect against foreign threats. In practice, they have been used to spy on Americans and to treat everyone as a potential threat. Story 8. Trickle-down Reaganomics. The only thing that trickles down is pee. Story 9. Funding the school system with a real estate tax. I don't know why or how this is not at the center of any politician's message or any voter's expectations. Story 10. Taxicab medallions must be near the top. A medallion is a government-issued license to provide taxicab service to customers, artificially limited and turned into an investment asset. The medallions are auctioned off. Many are purchased by investors and cab drivers often rent medallions from those investors. This is a clear example of the difference between capitalism and a free market. The government has created an investment asset that investors can profit from by restraining the free market in a competitive business. Story 11. Any legislation marketed as common sense is not objectively measurable and is likely either intrusive or deliberately useless. Story 12. The Big Beautiful Bill is the largest transfer of wealth from the lower and middle classes to the upper class in United States history. Story 13. DOGE was a pretty open attempt to acquire massive amounts of information about all American citizens and place it in private hands. The rest was window dressing. Story 14. Tax cuts for the wealthy leading to trickle-down economics are followed by subsidies for private and publicly owned companies that are already profitable. In the energy industry, oil, gas, and coal receive subsidies that alternative energy does not. Oil and natural gas companies are already highly profitable. Why are we subsidizing them? I understand subsidizing farmers during a tough year to prevent widespread closures after 1 or 2 bad seasons, which would harm food sustainability and availability. However, there is no reason that heavily profitable industries such as oil, which already have vast infrastructure in place, should receive subsidies. Story 15. The claim that petrol vehicles older than 15 years are not allowed in India is not true. Story 16. Anything related to public safety is likely a way for an agency to infringe on your privacy or rights. Story 17. School vouchers take public school funding and give it to private, for-profit schools. Charter schools can appear attractive because they exclude students who struggle academically or have behavior problems, leaving public schools to serve them. In addition, the way public schools are funded is problematic, relying on certain taxes. Tax breaks offered to companies to locate in a city are intended to bring jobs. But there was controversy when a company received a tax break yet did not have positions filled or people in the building as expected due to the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic. Many of these companies do not create enough well-paying jobs to justify the tax breaks. Story 18. Canada's Foreign Worker Program is used to suppress workers' wages. Story 19. Capital gains are treated separately from ordinary income in the tax code. Income is income and should be taxed accordingly. The difference in marginal rates creates perverse incentives for compensation. Story 20. I think the policies in the United States are hypocritical compared with our actions. For example, anything involving climate or the environment is not taken seriously by too many people, restrictions are lifted, yet we try to spread awareness and technology about these matters globally. Education is a huge problem. The Every Student Succeeds Act gives too much power to the states, resulting in educational inequality. States can set their own standards, and many do not address the problem. Schools are not given enough funding. Some states even lower their standards to make it appear that more children are succeeding. We should address inequality and identify and solve the root problems. There should be a stronger national standard to compete globally and to ensure that children in states with lower standards have a better chance of succeeding in the college or university of their choice. Story 21. I would point to tax breaks for giant corporations. They are usually sold as helping the economy, but most of the time the money just makes rich companies richer while normal people do not see much benefit. Story 22. Food stamps and other vouchers. Just give people money. I worked at a grocery store. People would nervously pull out this card. We knew it was an electronic benefits transfer card because the machine would reject a hot sandwich, so we had to mark it as cold. That was something about labor. Yet they could buy candy with it. Story 23. Capital gains tax. You work all day and pay your share of taxes. Your wealthy neighbor saw the value of his stock rise and sold it for a profit, yet he pays far less tax. Warren Buffett has a good response. The usual argument is that if we raise the capital gains tax, no one will invest anymore. He says, if you have a good investment but you will not make it because you might pay more in taxes on your profit, let me know what the investment is and I will make it. It is wrong to assume that making investors pay their fair share would tank the economy. Story 24. Anything sold as providing mental health services or clinics for homeless, poor, or drug-addicted populations is often run like a low-security prison. They are filthy, staffed by power-tripping and unqualified personnel, and have doctors who treat everything with heavy medication. These programs act as a revolving door that encourages relapse, so people are forced to return and spend more money on treatments. The money ends up funneled to those at the top and nothing is solved. Story 25. The No Child Left Behind Act and the Common Core curriculum were policies of different administrations. One was enacted under George W. Bush and the other under Barack Obama. Both made learning more difficult and resulted in contracts awarded without competitive bidding. There are no sides when all the pigs are at the trough. Story 26. Food and housing support. Listen, the people who receive support need it only because of inadequate labor laws. At one point, approximately $6 billion in food stamps was distributed per year to employees of Walmart. That is taxpayers subsidizing labor costs. Therefore, employers whose employees receive public assistance should face higher taxes to cover those costs. Story 27. Lowering sales taxes has different effects. In countries where taxes are included in the price, as in my country, corporations keep the same prices, so customers pay the same while corporations increase profits. In countries where taxes are not included in the price, corporations raise prices because they know customers can afford them. Story 28. Nobody is going to like this, but the Affordable Care Act free policies for the impoverished are an outright scam. The out-of-pocket maximums and deductibles are very high, which means that if you need one of these policies, there is no way you can afford the deductible. As a result, Every payment from the government to the insurance company simply enriches corporate executives and provides no benefit to the insured person. Story 29. Privatizing or defunding public services to make them more efficient or profitable is misguided. They are services, not businesses, for a reason. They need management that prioritizes benefit to the end user instead of profit for shareholders or owners, which are often in conflict in practice. Defunding is often justified by pointing to poor results and saying something like we already spend a large amount on it and it is still bad, as if spending less would not make it worse. When a service underperforms, it is usually because of poor management, insufficient funding, or both. Cutting funds in response to poor performance only creates a downward spiral. Some people support this idea even though it objectively worsens outcomes for them as services decline or are gradually sold off. Story 30. Internal Revenue Service Free File. The agency could prepare everyone's taxes, but the tax preparation industry pretends it is too complicated or that this low-income program is sufficient. Story 31. The requirement to be an accredited investor with a net worth of over $1 million United States dollars, not including real estate, or an annual income of over $200,000 for an individual or $300,000 for a married couple, limits access to certain types of investment vehicles. This is a way to gatekeep wealth opportunities from the poor and middle class under the guise of consumer protection, which is clearly false given the large number of obvious scams targeting those groups that go unaddressed. Story 32. Biofuels are essentially farming subsidies. They generally have a negative environmental impact by every metric, yet they are mandated to be a portion of automobile fuel. It is a straight-up, unambiguous scam. No potential presidential candidate wants or can afford to anger Iowa. Story 33. Rent control. At best, it provides a short-term benefit to people who vote, but it is harmful in the medium term. Story 34. Means testing welfare benefits. Georgia spent twice as much on verifying Medicaid eligibility as it spent on providing Medicaid benefits. Story 35. Right-to-work laws in the United States say that if your workplace is unionized, the union must represent and protect you whether you pay union dues or not. The explicit rationale is that you did not choose to have the workplace unionized, so you should not be forced to pay dues just because you work there. The implicit effect is that many employees will not pay dues if they receive union protection anyway, which weakens the union and can lead to its collapse. Many policymakers intend this outcome. They want unions to be weaker or eliminated because strong unions tend to raise wages, improve workplace protections, and strengthen labor laws. Story 36. Make America Great Again and their entire platform, but I think that goes without saying. Story 37. I think it would be easier to answer if you asked the reverse of that question, or maybe not. Story 38. If you are too poor to take advantage of vouchers like cash for clunkers, electric vehicle tax credits, or solar rebates, and those vouchers expire, they become marketing campaigns for corporations and coupons for the wealthy. Here is how they should work. Never expire. Credits should remain in a permanent personal account until you can use them, not vanish because you could not afford the upfront cost during an arbitrary window. Ratio-based. Pegged to a percentage of industry median costs, for example 20%, so the benefit stays meaningful even as prices change. Fully visible. A dashboard showing every voucher you qualify for in one place, with no hunting through government websites. Aggregatable. Let people combine multiple vouchers for a single major purchase. Cannot afford an electric vehicle? Stack your electric vehicle credit with appliance rebates and energy efficiency vouchers to replace that 20-year-old furnace that just broke with an efficient heat pump. The current system optimizes for political optics and quick deployment. It should optimize for actual household capability and long-term benefit access. Story 39. Tax breaks allow wealthy people to move money and avoid taxes that ordinary people cannot avoid. Regular people are burdened with many fees and taxes, while the wealthy use legal strategies to shelter income. Worse, they have convinced ordinary people that taxing these advantages would be wrong, arguing it would harm them if they someday became wealthy. At the same time, the wealthy take further steps to prevent ordinary people from becoming rich. Stop supporting policies that protect these advantages. Story 40. All of them, but in terms of impact on our lives, the order is 1. Social Security. 2. Subsidies to private corporations. 3. Military spending, the vast majority of which is simply money laundering. 4. Any special perks, pay, or health insurance benefits that members of Congress receive. 5. Bailouts. 6. White-collar prison camps. Crime is crime. Let them deal with the consequences. Hopefully temporarily, immigration and customs enforcement deportations are at the top of the list. Story 41. Virtually every government policy is corrupt at its core. Government functions like a legalized mafia. Everything it gives was first taken by force, and everything it dictates is enforced by coercion. As Rothbard put it, the state is that organization. In society which maintains a monopoly on force and funds itself not by voluntary exchange, but by coercion. Ultimately, if any action by government were not corrupt, it would not have to be carried out at gunpoint or under the threat of imprisonment. Story 42. The scariest phrase is, "I am with the government and I am here to help." Story 43. How about billions going to socially conservative countries, such as those in the Middle East or in Africa, for gender equality? Come on. We know it is meant to pad your bank account or a foundation you profit from. Story 44. Licensing is just paying the government for permission to do things you could already do without a license. Story 45. Mass migration helps the economy. It only helps the rich. Story 46. The Big Beautiful Bill is the single most damaging and financially debilitating bill to the working middle class in the last century. It will take an entire generation to undo and vote out the flagrant billionaire pandering changes made in that bill. And the government says it is going to help us. Story 47. Plastic bag ban. Yeah, let us save the planet one overpriced reusable bag at a time that I forget at home every single time. Story 48. I'm from the United States, I said, gesturing broadly at everything around me. Story 49. Statutes named after deceased white women are guaranteed to erode civil liberties and privacy. Story 50. I'm not sure whether my records are corrupt. I have been away from the United States for most of my life, and it appears that I am not in their artificial intelligence system. There is no help available. I have been navigating alone for about 120 days to figure out how to get all the artificial intelligence systems to accept my documents. Banks had a hard time. It took about 2 hours to open a simple account. I then spent weeks reading to navigate the state tax office. Even Google has been wrong, listing law offices that do not exist or showing buildings that are not there when I arrive. Lawyers say they can help, then admit they do not know how. Universities say they have services, but later email to say they cannot solve it either. This process has been slow. My former boss had to do this once before. He worked outside the country for about 25 years, and Canada marked him as deceased. Story 51. Means testing is ineffective. Wealthy people do not accept handouts. Making relief harder to obtain costs programs more money than they save. Story 52. Regulations on consumer protection, employee working conditions, and environmental protection are not designed to help the masses. They are primarily designed to enable larger companies to have a persistent advantage over smaller companies, which are less able to afford compliance costs. It is an unfortunate trade-off that leads to bizarre relationships. In 2008 to 2009, when the United States healthcare system was being reformed by the Affordable Care Act, you would not expect Walmart to be arguing for more employee benefits. But that policy would have allowed Walmart to undercut Target and accelerate the decline of Kmart and Sears. If you want more employee rights, you might be encouraging monopolies. Economics is complicated. Story 53. We want your fingerprints in our files to find you. American police officers say this to elementary school children, right? Because they have not been building a national database since the early 1980s. Next, it will be deoxyribonucleic acid. Story 54. Someone's law. My spidey senses tingle whenever a law is passed and named after someone. That person is usually dead, and the law tends to be a knee-jerk solution that needed proper consideration. Story 55. In the United States, federally guaranteed student loans were intended to improve college affordability for middle and lower income people, but they became a debt trap. Story 56. The temporary foreign worker program in Canada is supposed to bring skilled, valuable workers into the country, similar to the H-1B visa in the United States, but it has instead become a form of modern slavery. The United Nations has criticized Canada for this. Story 57. Right-to-work laws. Propaganda from the top and many businesses has made people afraid of or hostile toward unions. Collective bargaining is the one protection that could have saved many workers from job insecurity. Now workers' lives are in the hands of those who control capital. Story 58. Whenever they partner with a private company to refurbish a public space, the private company receives a 50-year lease for a minimal amount of money to manage the space and then charges whatever it wants. Story 59. Environmental and historical impact studies are both very important to me, but they are often abused by not-in-my-backyard opponents and by people seeking to extract money from the government through increasingly elaborate studies. Story 60. In the United Kingdom, the Online Safety Act is nothing but an attempt by our government to dictate the internet. It has backfired massively, with sites pulling out of the country under the guise of protecting children, despite the fact that a simple virtual private network can circumvent the whole thing. Story 61. Protect children. Forgive debts and charge small fees to generate revenue. Lower taxes to reduce tax evasion. Defund the school because teachers are left-wing. Hostility toward gay people. Hostility toward transgender people. Hostility toward black people. Story 62. When a government says that something is happening, it guarantees that it is happening. Story 63. Anything that's sold as in my own interest, or, if opposed, described as voting against my own interests, presumes knowledge of me. You don't know me, my interests, or anything that lumps me into some kind of fictitious class. Story 64. Health insurance and working with insurers in general. Story 65. Requiring children to get to school at 8:30 a.m. and dismissing at 2:30 p.m. means you literally have to wake them at 6 a.m. From kindergarten onward, this is required. Otherwise, the child is truant and the parents can face legal consequences. Not every child is able to do that. Those who cannot are often pushed into special education programs and told they have something wrong with them because they are different, labeled with autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, depression, or another diagnosis because they do not meet the unrealistic expectations placed on them at age 5. They are then medicated to control their behavior so that large pharmaceutical companies can sell drugs to children and profit while billing the government or private insurance. If the child or their parents refuse to comply, they can be bullied relentlessly by the system. The system may even remove the child and place them in a facility where they face cruelty and abuse from staff and other children. As they grow older, they can suffer extreme trauma, neurological damage from that trauma, increased risks of substance abuse and disability, and often end up homeless and unable to interact with society. That is who you drove past today, likely in camping groups or in hordes, while you thought to yourself, they're bums, they're lazy, they do drugs, they did it to themselves, or they deserve to be homeless. That is what your government and education system can do to innocent children. Parents of children with individualized education programs know this. Anything sold as providing mental health services or clinics to homeless, poor, or drug-addicted populations is often run like a low-security prison, dirty, staffed by unqualified or power-tripping employees, and by doctors who treat everything with heavy medication and operate programs as a revolving door to encourage relapse so people return and spend more on treatments. The money ends up funneled to those at the top and problems remain unsolved. Our country, our children, and ourselves are being harmed by large pharmaceutical companies in a deliberate profit scheme. Story 66. No more billionaires. Policies that help only oligarchs must end. Story 67. The Electoral College no longer serves the reasons it was created to address. Nothing else in the United States is decided by anything other than the popular vote. The system allows a candidate who loses the popular vote to win the presidency. That outcome does not reflect the will of the people. It now exists mainly to benefit Republicans. Story 68. Gestures wildly at everything the Trump administration has done since January. Story 69. Under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, People were fined for not paying health insurance companies. Story 70, Trump's invasions and immigration and customs enforcement raids target blue cities, and this pattern characterizes much of what he does. Story 71, I'll start with minimum wage increases. Prices for everything go up right after, but cool, I got extra coins for the vending machine. They were supposed to compensate for inflation, but they did not. Story 72, not the concept of universal health care, but everything that has been proposed and gained traction as universal health care. Story 73, these are laws, not policy. I am a United States citizen who has always been skeptical of expanding government power. Today we see what happens when you criminalize thought. Disliking Jewish people is wrong, and arresting people for protesting the government actions of Israel should not be a criminal act. Story 74, progressive taxation is really regressive by definition. But no politician wants to admit that. Tax the rich. Story 75, Section 340B drug pricing program is an industry worth more than $60 billion that no one has heard of. Story 76, Israel is our greatest ally, but it is desperately trying to control our government to build its ethnostate. Story 77, their goal is always to extract money from us and to start wars with other countries. The United States federal government is my government, so that is what I am referring to. Anytime they say a policy will help us, I do not believe it for a second. There is a reason Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell are worth insane amounts of money, and it is not from helping civilians. Story 78, minimum wage helps keep people dependent on welfare and leaves local businesses understaffed. Story 79, negative gearing, funneling taxpayer money to property owners in exchange for votes. Both sides are in on it. An absolute rort. Story 80, the Affordable Care Act's health insurance mandates force people to buy inadequate coverage at high premiums. Story 81, the latest sales tax in Los Angeles County is intended to provide aid to people experiencing homelessness. It is a complete money grab. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.